One day, without warning, you look into the mirror and realize that the face looking back at you has changed. The lines are deeper, the hair is thinner or whiter, the eyes may appear more tired than they once did. The body that used to move without hesitation now asks for more time, more care, and more patience. And in that moment, a quiet fear may rise inside you. Where did all the years go? How much time is left? What if the best part of my life is already behind me? The world teaches us to fear old age. It treats youth as a prize and aging as a defeat. It celebrates speed, beauty, ambition, productivity, and constant activity. Then, when the body begins to slow down, many people feel as though they are becoming less important. But Buddhism sees aging in a completely different way. Buddhism does not describe old age as a mistake. It does not treat wrinkles as evidence that you have failed. It does not say that your value decreases when your strength decreases. Instead, Buddhism teaches that aging is one of life's greatest teachers. Old age reveals what youth often hides. It shows you that the body was never permanent. It shows you that possessions cannot protect you from change. It shows you which relationships were genuine and which were based only on convenience. It shows you how much energy you wasted trying to impress people who were never thinking about you as much as you imagined. Aging removes many illusions that can feel frightening, but it can also be liberating. You no longer have to continue living by the rules that kept you anxious for decades. You do not have to compete with younger people. You do not have to prove that you are still useful, still attractive, still successful, or still important. You can begin to live from wisdom rather than fear. Perhaps you carry regrets. Perhaps there are things you wish you had done differently. Perhaps you gave too much time to people who did not appreciate you. Perhaps you worked so hard to build a life that you forgot to experience it. You cannot return to the past and rewrite those years, but you can stop allowing the past to steal the years that remain. That is one of the most important decisions an older person can make. The years behind you are gone, but the present moment is still alive. This breath is still alive. This day is still alive. Your ability to understand, forgive, release, appreciate, and awaken is still alive. You may not control how many years remain, but you still have influence over how deeply you live them. You can spend them fighting reality, or you can spend them understanding reality. You can spend them worrying about what is disappearing, or you can spend them becoming grateful for what is still here. You can spend them carrying every wound from the past, or you can finally put down what has become too heavy. Buddhist wisdom does not promise that aging will be painless. The body may hurt. People you love may leave. Independence may decrease. The future may feel uncertain. But Buddhism offers something more realistic than a false promise. It teaches that even when you cannot control what happens to the body, you can change your relationship with what happens. Even when life becomes smaller on the outside, it can become deeper on the inside. Even when the world pays less attention to you, you can begin paying more attention to your own mind. Even when many doors close, the door to wisdom can remain open. These 7 truths about aging are not meant to make you feel temporarily comforted. They are meant to change the way you see the years ahead. Listen carefully. Some truths are understood by the mind, others must be felt by the heart, and some are only understood after a lifetime of running from them. Truth 1. Aging is not a personal failure. You did not fail because your body became older. You did not do something wrong because your energy changed. You are not being punished because your appearance no longer resembles the person you were 30 or 40 years ago. Aging is not an insult directed at you personally. It is the natural condition of every living body. The Buddha repeatedly encouraged people to reflect on the fact that they were subject to aging. This reflection was not intended to create hopelessness. It was intended to remove ignorance. When you understand that aging is natural, you stop treating it as a personal injustice. Much of the emotional suffering of old age begins with comparison. You compare your present body with your younger body. You compare your current strength with the strength you once had. You compare your life with people of the same age who appear healthier, wealthier, more active, or more surrounded by family. You compare how society treats you now with how it treated you when you were younger, and every comparison seems to deliver the same cruel message: you are losing. But life is not a competition against your former self. The person you were at 20 could run faster, but perhaps that person did not understand patience. The person you were at 30 may have looked stronger, but perhaps that person was controlled by ambition. The person you were at 40 may have earned more money, but perhaps that person could not sit peacefully for 10 minutes. Youth has abilities that old age does not have. Old age also has possibilities that youth rarely understands. There is a kind of intelligence that cannot be gained from books. It comes from watching plans fail. It comes from loving people you could not keep. It comes from making decisions you later regretted. It comes from surviving days you once believed would destroy you. It comes from discovering that many things you desperately wanted did not bring the happiness you expected. This intelligence is not visible in the mirror. It cannot be measured by physical strength. It is the intelligence of experience. Yet many older people ignore this gift because they are too busy mourning the gifts of youth. They look at what has disappeared, but fail to recognize what has developed. The world may value speed, but wisdom is rarely fast. The world may value beauty, but beauty does not automatically create peace. The world may value productivity, but a person can remain productive for decades while being completely disconnected from the meaning of life. Buddhism asks a different question. Not, how young do you still appear? Not, how much work can you still perform? Not, how many people still admire you? The question is, how clearly do you understand the nature of your own mind? A person may be 80 years old and still be driven by jealousy, resentment, greed, and the need for approval. Another person may be 65 and finally realize that these burdens are optional. Chronological age does not automatically produce wisdom. Some people grow older without growing inwardly. They repeat the same complaints. They preserve the same grudges. They demand that life follow the same expectations. They become physically older, but emotionally remain trapped in battles from decades ago. Real maturity begins when you stop asking life to return what time has taken. You accept that a season has changed. Acceptance does not mean that you enjoy every part of aging. It does not mean that you stop caring for your health. It does not mean that you ignore illness or pretend that physical limitations do not matter. Acceptance means that you stop adding humiliation to reality. Your knees may hurt. That is physical discomfort. Telling yourself that you are useless because your knees hurt is emotional suffering. Your memory may not be as quick as it once was. That is a change in the body and brain. Calling yourself worthless because you forgot something is a judgment created by the mind. You may need help with tasks you once handled alone. That may be difficult. Believing that receiving help makes you a burden is an interpretation, not an absolute truth. Notice how quickly the mind turns natural change into personal shame. The body changes, and the mind says, I am becoming nothing. The body slows, and the mind says, I no longer matter. Someone offers assistance, and the mind says, I have lost my dignity. But dignity does not come from never needing anyone. Every human being begins life completely dependent on others. A baby cannot feed itself, protect itself, or survive alone. Yet no one calls the baby undignified. Dependence becomes humiliating only when the mind connects worth with independence. Buddhist wisdom challenges that belief. Human life has always been interdependent. The food you ate was grown by someone. The roads you traveled were built by someone. The medicine you used was developed by countless people. The knowledge you gained came through teachers, parents, books, cultures, and communities. You were never as independent as you imagined. Old age simply makes interdependence more visible. That visibility can wound your pride, or it can deepen your humility. You can say, I hate needing others. Or you can say, now I see more clearly how deeply human beings rely upon one another. This is not weakness, it is reality. One day, the people helping you may need help themselves. Life constantly moves people between the roles of giver and receiver. Sometimes you carry others, sometimes others carry you. Wisdom allows both without arrogance and without shame. Aging also teaches you to stop measuring your value through usefulness. This is a difficult lesson, especially for people who spent their lives caring for families, working, building businesses, solving problems, or supporting others. You may have learned to believe, I am valuable because people need me. Then children become independent. A career ends. Responsibilities decrease. The phone rings less often. Suddenly, you may wonder who you are when nobody urgently requires your help. This can become a spiritual crisis, but it can also become a doorway. Perhaps your value never depended on how useful you were. Perhaps you were always more than your function. A tree is not valuable only because it produces fruit. A river is not valuable only because people drink from it. A sunset does not need to accomplish anything to be worthy of attention. Your life does not need to remain productive in the same way to remain meaningful. You may contribute differently now. You may listen more than you speak. You may offer calm rather than solutions. You may become the person whose presence reminds others to slow down. You may share hard-earned understanding when it is welcomed. You may practice kindness in ordinary moments. You may finally learn how to be present without turning every moment into a task. These contributions are quieter, so society may not praise them. But quiet does not mean insignificant. Some of the most important work of old age happens invisibly. You may be ending a pattern of bitterness that has traveled through your family for generations. You may be learning to apologize. You may be deciding not to pass your fear to your children. You may be releasing expectations that made everyone around you feel guilty. You may be practicing patience with a body that no longer obeys every command. You may be preparing to face death with greater understanding. This inner work may not produce money or public recognition, but it can transform the emotional atmosphere of an entire family. Do not underestimate the effect of one older person who has made peace with life. Their presence feels different. They do not demand constant attention. They do not manipulate others with guilt. They do not use age as a weapon. They do not insist that everyone live according to their preferences. They have stopped fighting every change. Their calm becomes a shelter for others. This is a form of strength that youth cannot imitate. So when the mirror shows you an older face, do not immediately search for the younger person who disappeared. Look more carefully. See the person who endured. See the person who learned. See the person who made mistakes and still continued. See the person who has the opportunity, perhaps for the first time, to live without pretending. Aging is not evidence that you failed. It is evidence that you remained long enough to witness change. The question is not whether you can stop aging. You cannot. The question is whether you will age with resentment or with understanding. Will you spend your remaining years apologizing for becoming older, or will you finally accept your place in the natural movement of life? The body is doing what bodies have always done. There is no shame in nature. Truth 2. The body grows older, but awareness can grow clearer. Many people assume that when the body declines, the whole person must decline. But Buddhism makes an important distinction between the body and the awareness that observes the body. The body changes constantly. It grows, strengthens, weakens, becomes ill, recovers, and eventually dies. But throughout these changes, there is an ability to notice. You can notice discomfort. You can notice fear. You can notice memory. You can notice thoughts about the past. You can notice the desire to be younger. This ability to observe does not mean that there is a permanent, unchanging soul hidden inside the body. Buddhism does not teach a fixed self that remains untouched forever. Instead, it teaches you to examine experience directly. The body is changing. Feelings are changing. Thoughts are changing. Moods are changing. Yet awareness can become more stable, spacious, and less reactive. You may not be able to make the body younger, but you can train the mind not to panic every time the body reminds you of age. This is one of the greatest opportunities of later life. When you were younger, You may have had very little interest in observing your mind. You were busy building a career, raising children, paying bills, maintaining relationships, and pursuing goals. The mind was constantly moving outward. What do I need to accomplish? What do others think of me? How can I obtain more security? What problem must I solve next? What am I missing? There was always another task. Old age often reduces the number of external tasks. At first, this may feel like emptiness, but that emptiness can become space. You finally have an opportunity to see the machinery of your own mind. You begin to notice how a single thought can change the entire day. You wake up feeling physically tired. The mind says, "I am deteriorating." That thought creates sadness. Sadness creates withdrawal. Withdrawal creates loneliness. Loneliness creates more thoughts about being forgotten. Soon, the whole day is shaped by one unquestioned interpretation. Mindfulness interrupts this chain. You wake up feeling tired. You notice, tiredness is present. That is different from saying, "My life is ending." You notice heaviness in the body. You notice worry appearing. You notice the urge to predict the future. You do not need to believe every thought that arrives. This is a profound form of freedom. Many people live as though every thought is a command. If the mind says, "Nobody cares about me," they immediately experience that thought as truth. If the mind says, "My children should visit more," they begin building a case against their children. If the mind says, "The future will be unbearable," they start suffering from events that have not occurred. Mindfulness teaches you to say, "This is a thought, not a prophecy, not a law, not necessarily a fact, a thought. It has appeared because of causes and conditions. Perhaps the body is tired. Perhaps you recently experienced disappointment. Perhaps you saw an old photograph. Perhaps someone failed to call. The thought arose. If you do not feed it, it will change. Everything in the mind changes. This is not theory. Watch closely. A feeling of sadness seems permanent while you are inside it, but it shifts. Anger feels completely justified, but after several hours it changes. Fear feels like the only possible response, but when the body relaxes, fear may weaken. The mind is a moving process. Old age becomes much harder when you turn temporary mental states into permanent identities. You feel lonely and say, "I am alone." You feel confused and say, "I am losing myself." You feel useless and say, "I have no purpose." You feel afraid and say, "I am a frightened person." Buddhist practice creates distance between experience and identity. Loneliness is present, but it is not the whole of you. Confusion is present, but it is not the whole of you. Fear is present, but it is not the whole of you. Pain is present, but it is not the whole of you. There is also breathing. There is also hearing. There is also the sensation of the chair beneath you. There is also the light entering the room. There is also awareness knowing the pain. When attention becomes narrow, suffering fills the entire world. When attention becomes wider, suffering becomes one part of a larger experience. Imagine sitting beside a window on a difficult morning. Your back hurts. You are worried about a medical result. Someone you love has not contacted you. The mind begins to contract. It says, "Everything is wrong." But is everything wrong? The breath is still moving. The window is still holding light. A bird may be calling outside. Your hands may still feel warmth around a cup. The mind says, "These small things do not matter." But life has always been made of small things. You may have spent decades waiting for dramatic happiness, a promotion, a wedding, a house, a successful child, a long-awaited holiday. These moments came and went. What remained were ordinary mornings, ordinary meals, ordinary conversations, ordinary breaths. Old age can teach you what youth often refuses to accept. The ordinary moment is not a delay before real life. The ordinary moment is real life. Awareness allows you to enter it. When you drink tea, know that you are drinking tea. When you walk slowly, know that you are walking slowly. When you feel pain, notice the direct sensations before the mind adds a story. When someone speaks, listen without preparing your next complaint. When you rest, allow resting to be enough. This sounds simple, but it is not easy. The mind has been trained for decades to escape the present. It travels backward into regret. It travels forward into fear. It builds imaginary conversations. It replays insults. It asks whether people appreciate you. It searches for evidence that you have been forgotten. The untrained mind can turn a quiet afternoon into a courtroom where everyone from your past is placed on trial. You become the judge, the witness, the victim, and the prosecutor. You present the same evidence again and again. What did this person say 20 years ago? Why did that relative fail to support me? Why was I treated unfairly? Why did life not unfold according to my plans? The body may be sitting safely in a room, but the mind is fighting ghosts. Awareness says, this is memory. Memory can be useful. It can teach you. It can preserve love. But memory becomes harmful when it is used to reopen wounds that cannot be changed. You are not required to attend every argument that the mind creates. You are not required to answer every accusation from the past. You can notice the memory, feel the emotion in the body, and return to the present, again and again. This is training. Do not expect the mind to become peaceful immediately. You may have spent 60 or 70 years practicing worry without realizing it. You have rehearsed certain fears thousands of times. You have strengthened resentment by repeating the same story. You have trained the mind to compare, judge, and anticipate danger. Now you must practice a different habit. Begin with the breath. Not because breathing is magical, but because the breath is happening now. Feel one inhalation, feel one exhalation. Do not force it. Do not demand peace. Simply know that breathing is occurring. The mind will wander. Return. It will wander again. Return again. Every return is a moment of awakening. You are teaching the mind that it does not have to remain trapped in thought. On some days, you may only manage a few seconds of clear awareness. That still matters. A few seconds of awareness can prevent a thought from becoming an entire day of suffering. Over time, you may notice something important. The body can be uncomfortable, while the mind remains gentle. Fear can arise without taking control. Sadness can be present without becoming hopelessness. You can experience loss without losing all contact with gratitude. This is not emotional suppression. You are not pretending that everything is fine. You are learning not to become completely possessed by what you feel. A wise person does not say, I must never be sad. A wise person says, sadness has arrived. Let me understand it. Where is it felt in the body? What thought is feeding it? What expectation has been disappointed? Is there loneliness beneath it? Is there fear beneath the loneliness? Can this experience be held with compassion rather than judgment? Awareness transforms your relationship with suffering. Instead of becoming your enemy, suffering becomes information. It shows you where attachment remains. It shows you what you are demanding from life. It shows you where the mind is still saying, this must not change. That understanding is more valuable than pretending to be positive. You do not need to force yourself to smile. You need to see clearly. Clarity is kinder than false optimism. The body will continue to age. Some abilities may decrease, but awareness can become less confused. You can become less easily provoked. You can become more selective about which thoughts deserve attention. You can stop turning every inconvenience into evidence that life is against you. You can begin to see the difference between pain and panic, between memory and reality, between solitude and abandonment. The world may think your life is becoming smaller, but a single moment, fully understood, is larger than years lived unconsciously. You do not need more time to awaken. You need deeper attention to the time that is here. Truth 3. Resistance creates more suffering than age itself. Aging brings pain. Buddhism does not deny this. The body becomes vulnerable. People die. Plans become uncertain. Abilities change. There may be medical appointments, difficult diagnoses, financial concerns, grief, and loneliness. These experiences are real, but Buddhism teaches that suffering is often intensified by resistance. Pain says, this hurts. Resistance says, this should not be happening to me. Change says, life is different now. Resistance says, Life must return to the way it was. The body says, I need to slow down. Resistance says, I refuse to accept weakness. A loved one makes a choice you dislike. Resistance says, they must live according to my expectations. The first experience may be unavoidable. The second layer is created by the mind. This does not mean that every problem can be solved by changing your attitude. Some circumstances are genuinely difficult. Poverty cannot be removed through positive thinking. Illness may require treatment. Abuse should not be passively accepted. Loneliness may require reaching out and rebuilding connection. Buddhism is not telling you to tolerate harmful conditions without action. It is telling you to stop fighting facts that have already become facts. There is a difference between responding and resisting. Responding is practical. Resisting is psychological warfare against reality. Suppose you can no longer drive safely. A practical response is to explore transportation options, ask for help, adjust routines, and grieve the loss honestly. Resistance says, I should still be able to drive. I have always driven. Nobody can tell me what to do. The resistance may protect pride for a while, but it creates conflict and danger. Suppose your adult children have lives that do not revolve around you. A practical response is to communicate your needs clearly, create other forms of connection, and respect their responsibilities. Resistance says, after everything I did for them, they owe me constant attention. That thought may feel justified, but it turns love into a debt. You begin measuring every call, every visit, and every delay. You no longer receive affection freely because you are constantly checking whether it is enough. This is one of the great traps of old age. Expectations become invisible contracts. You believe children should call a certain number of times. Grandchildren should show a certain amount of respect. Relatives should remember every special date. Friends should remain as available as they once were. Doctors should always provide certainty. The body should continue behaving in familiar ways. Life should reward you for all the difficulties you endured. When these contracts are broken, you feel betrayed. But did the other people ever agree to these contracts? Or were the contracts written silently inside your mind? Buddhist wisdom asks you to examine expectation before blaming the world. This is uncomfortable because expectations often hide beneath moral language. You do not say, I want attention. You say, people have no values anymore. You do not say, I am afraid of being forgotten. You say, young people are selfish. You do not say, I need reassurance. You say, nobody respects elders. Sometimes the complaint may contain truth. Cultures do change. Families can become neglectful. People can behave selfishly, but anger becomes more manageable when you recognize the vulnerable feeling beneath it. Perhaps you are not only angry, perhaps you are lonely. Perhaps you are frightened that your importance in the family is decreasing. Perhaps you are grieving the role you once had. If you only express anger, people may avoid you. Then their distance confirms your fear. You say, see, nobody cares, but they may care and still feel exhausted by constant criticism. This is where honest self-observation becomes necessary. Age does not make every opinion correct. Suffering does not automatically make every reaction wise. You can be wounded and still wound others. You can be neglected in one relationship and controlling in another. You can deserve compassion while also needing to change your behavior. Buddhism does not give old age permission to avoid responsibility. In fact, later life may be the most important time to examine the patterns you have defended for decades. Do you use guilt to control your children? Do you remind people of everything you sacrificed so they feel permanently indebted? Do you reject help and then accuse others of not helping? Do you complain that nobody visits while making every visit emotionally exhausting? Do you interpret disagreement as disrespect? Do you demand honesty but punish people when they speak honestly? These questions are not meant to shame you. They are meant to free you. You cannot change a pattern you refuse to see. Resistance is not only directed toward other people, it is often directed toward the body. The body becomes the enemy. You may look at your hands and dislike the changes. You may become embarrassed by slower movement. You may feel betrayed by illness. You may constantly compare your body with photographs from the past. But the body never promised to remain young. It never signed an agreement to stay strong forever. From the day it was born, it was moving toward change. The surprise is not that the body aged. The surprise is that the mind expected anything else. This expectation is understandable. When you are young, aging seems distant and abstract. You see older people, but do not fully understand that their condition is your future. You live as though you are the exception. Then time reveals that there are no exceptions. Every beautiful face changes. Every strong body becomes vulnerable. Every person who moves quickly will eventually slow down unless life ends earlier. This is not cruelty. This is the shared condition of embodiment. When you recognize that aging is universal, self-pity can soften. You are not being singled out. You are participating in the same law that governs every generation. Your grandparents experienced it. Your parents experienced it. People younger than you will experience it. The celebrities whose youth appears permanent on screens will experience it. The wealthy will experience it. The powerful will experience it. No social position cancels impermanence. This understanding creates humility. It can also create compassion. When you see another older person struggling to stand, you are seeing a reflection of vulnerability shared by all bodies. When you see a younger person obsessed with appearance, you may remember how convincing that illusion once felt. When you see someone terrified by a diagnosis, you understand that fear is not weakness. It is the mind meeting uncertainty. Resistance softens when compassion grows. Instead of saying, "Why is this happening to me?" you may begin asking, "How can I meet this experience wisely?" That question changes everything. "Why me?" often has no satisfying answer. "Why me?" assumes that life owes you exemption. "How can I meet this wisely?" returns power to the present. You may not control the diagnosis, but you can control whether you seek proper care. You may not control another person's choices, but you can control whether you spend the night rehearsing resentment. You may not control the speed of the body, but you can stop insulting yourself for moving slowly. You may not control how much time remains, but you can stop wasting today in an argument with yesterday. Acceptance is often misunderstood as surrender, but acceptance is the beginning of effective action. When you accept that rain is falling, you take an umbrella. When you refuse to accept the rain, you stand outside shouting at the sky. Acceptance does not stop the rain. It stops the useless argument. In old age, this principle becomes essential. Accept what has changed. Then ask what remains possible. Perhaps you cannot travel as you once did, but you can still experience beauty close to home. Perhaps you cannot work full-time, but you can still offer guidance when it is requested. Perhaps you cannot care for everyone, but you can practice kindness toward the person in front of you. Perhaps your memory is weaker, but you can create reminders and simplify routines. Perhaps some relationships have ended, but new forms of companionship remain possible. The mind often turns one closed door into the belief that every door is closed. This is another form of resistance. You may say, "Because I cannot live exactly as before, life is no longer worth living." But why must life remain exactly as before to have value? A river is still a river when it changes direction. A tree is still alive when it loses leaves. A day is still beautiful when the light becomes softer. Your life does not become meaningless because its form changes. Meaning can also change. When you were younger, meaning may have come from building. Now it may come from understanding. Before, meaning may have come from achievement. Now it may come from presence. Before, you may have wanted to influence many people. Now you may discover the value of being fully attentive to one person. Resistance says, "This is not the life I wanted." Wisdom asks, "What can this life teach me?" That is the difference between growing old bitterly and growing old consciously. Truth 4. Everything you love was never meant to be possessed. One of the hardest truths in Buddhism is also one of the most liberating. Nothing you love can be possessed forever. Not your body, not your partner, not your children, not your house. not your reputation, not your health, not even the identity you have built over a lifetime. Everything comes together because of conditions. Everything changes when those conditions change. The mind hears this and becomes frightened. It thinks, if I cannot keep anything, why should I love anything? But Buddhism does not tell you to stop loving. It teaches you to love without trying to own. Attachment and love are not the same. Love says, may you be well. Attachment says, you must remain close to me so that I feel secure. Love says, I appreciate your presence. Attachment says, your presence belongs to me. Love allows change. Attachment demands continuity. Love gives space. Attachment tightens its grip. Many people discover in old age that what they called love contained unspoken possession. A parent says, my child. A spouse says, my partner. A person says, my home, my family, my life. The word my is practical, but the mind turns it into ownership. Then children grow into adults and choose different values. A partner changes. Friends move away. The house is sold. The family structure changes. The mind experiences these events not only as change, but as theft. It says, something that belonged to me has been taken. But did it ever truly belong to you? Your children came through you, but they were never your possessions. They have their own minds, fears, desires, and consequences. You can guide them, you can love them, you can advise them when they are willing to listen, but you cannot live their lives for them. Trying to control adult children creates suffering on both sides. You may believe that control is concern. You say, I only want what is best. But what you mean may be, I want you to make choices that reduce my anxiety. These are not always the same thing. A child may choose a career you do not respect. They may marry someone you would not have selected. They may raise their children differently. They may move far away. They may not continue every tradition that shaped your life. You can spend your remaining years resisting these choices. You can criticize, withdraw affection, create guilt, and repeat your disapproval. Perhaps they will obey. But obedience produced by fear is not closeness. You may win the decision and lose the relationship. Buddhist wisdom asks you to examine what you truly want. Do you want control, or do you want connection? Control requires the other person to become smaller. Connection requires you to make room for difference. This does not mean that you approve of every choice. It means that you stop confusing love with management. You state your concern clearly. Then you allow another adult to carry the consequences of their own actions. This is a difficult form of letting go, but letting go does not mean abandoning people. It means abandoning the illusion that you can control what you cannot control. The same truth applies to a partner. Perhaps you spent decades together. You developed routines. You shared responsibilities, arguments, illnesses, celebrations, and ordinary days. Then one person changes. Perhaps illness changes their personality. Perhaps memory begins to fade. Perhaps the relationship becomes quieter. Perhaps death arrives. Grief may feel like proof that love was a mistake. You may think, I cannot bear this because I love too deeply. But grief is not evidence that love was wrong. Grief is evidence that conditions changed. The problem is not that you loved. The suffering intensifies when the mind insists, this person should still be here. The heart understands absence slowly. You cannot order grief to disappear. You cannot rush it. But you can hold grief without turning it into a permanent refusal of life. You can say, I wish you were here. You can also say, because you were here, my life was changed. You can feel the pain of separation without denying the gift of connection. Buddhism teaches that every meeting contains the possibility of parting. This sounds severe until you understand its purpose. It is meant to make you pay attention. If you remember that a person will not always be available, you listen differently. You become less interested in winning small arguments. You stop postponing gratitude. You become more careful with harsh words. You do not assume there will always be another chance to apologize. Impermanence does not reduce love. It makes love urgent and honest. Consider how casually people treat what they believe will always be there. A spouse enters the room and they barely look up. A friend calls and they rush the conversation. A parent is still alive, but they keep postponing the visit. Then conditions change and they would give anything for one ordinary afternoon. The awareness of impermanence says, do not wait until absence teaches you the value of presence. Old age gives you the opportunity to practice this awareness now. Look at the people who remain. They are changing. You are changing. The relationship is temporary. Let that truth make you kinder. Do not use it to create fear. Use it to remove carelessness. Perhaps there are words you have been withholding. Say them. Perhaps there is gratitude you assumed the other person already understood. Express it. Perhaps you are preserving an argument because you want the other person to admit they were wrong. Ask yourself whether being proven right is more important than the peace available now. This does not mean reconciling with everyone. Some relationships are harmful. Some people repeatedly violate trust. Compassion does not require unlimited access. You can release hatred without restoring intimacy. You can forgive internally without returning to a dangerous situation. You can wish someone freedom from suffering while maintaining a necessary boundary. Letting go is not the same as allowing harm. It is the decision not to carry poison after the danger has passed. Possessions also become a source of attachment in old age. A house may contain decades of memory. Every object seems connected to a story. Clothes, photographs, furniture, tools, documents, gifts, and items saved for a future that never arrived. The mind says, this is my life, but the objects are not your life. They are traces of experiences. Keeping everything does not keep the past alive. Sometimes it only creates a burden for you and for those who will eventually sort through what remains. This does not mean you must throw away everything meaningful. It means you should examine the fear beneath accumulation. Are you saving the object because it is useful, because it carries genuine meaning, or because letting it go feels like admitting that a chapter has ended? Many people use possessions to resist time. They keep rooms unchanged. They preserve clothing that no longer fits. They store broken objects because they remember who gave them. They surround themselves with evidence of former identities, but memory does not live inside the object alone. The love you experienced has already shaped you. You do not lose the relationship by releasing an item. Sometimes letting go of objects becomes a spiritual practice. You hold something and ask, does this still serve life? If yes, keep it with awareness. If no, release it with gratitude, not angrily, not carelessly. You can say, thank you. You belong to an earlier chapter. I do not need to carry you forward. This practice prepares the mind for larger forms of release, because eventually everything must be returned. The body will be returned to nature. The house will belong to someone else. The money will move into other hands. The stories people tell about you will change. Even your name will one day be spoken less often. This truth can seem terrifying if your identity depends on possession, but it becomes peaceful when you understand that life was never about permanent ownership. Life was about participation. You participated in relationships. You participated in work. You participated in family. You participated in pleasure and pain. You were never the permanent owner of the experience. You were a temporary participant. When you visit a beautiful garden, you do not need to own it to appreciate it. You walk through it. You notice the trees. You enjoy the fragrance. Then you leave. Life is similar. The problem begins when you enter the garden and say, everything here must remain exactly as I prefer. Then every falling leaf becomes an offense. Every changing season becomes a threat. Buddhist wisdom invites you to walk through life with open hands. Receive fully. Care deeply. Protect what is entrusted to you. But do not close your fist so tightly that love becomes fear. You cannot prevent every separation, but you can stop wasting presence by worrying constantly about loss. You can look at someone you love and silently remember, this person is not mine to keep forever. Then instead of becoming cold, you become grateful. You understand that this meeting is precious because it will not last. Truth 5. Your past does not have to control your remaining years. By the time a person reaches old age, the mind has collected an enormous archive. There are memories of childhood, memories of parents, memories of love and betrayal, memories of work, sacrifice, humiliation, success, conflict and loss. Some memories bring warmth, others still create pain after many decades. A single sentence spoken long ago may remain active in the mind. A parent's criticism, a spouse's betrayal, a sibling's selfishness, a friend's abandonment, an opportunity you missed, a mistake you made, a decision that changed the direction of your life. The event ended, but the mind continued carrying it. This is how the past controls the present, not because the past still exists, but because you repeatedly recreate it through thought. You may say, "I cannot help remembering." That is partly true. Memories arise on their own. But there is a difference between a memory appearing and building a home for it. A painful memory arrives. You replay the conversation. You imagine what you should have said. You judge the people involved. You imagine an alternative future. You tell the story again. Each repetition strengthens the emotional pathway. Soon, the mind can reach the wound instantly. This becomes a habit. Some older people spend their final years surrounded not by present reality, but by a collection of old injuries. They speak about what happened 20, 30, or 50 years ago as though it occurred yesterday. Their body has aged, but the wound has not been allowed to age. It remains preserved. Buddhism teaches that clinging causes suffering. We often imagine clinging only to pleasant things, but people also cling to pain. Pain becomes part of identity. You may not know who you would be without the story of what was done to you. You have repeated it so many times that it explains everything. Why you do not trust, why you became angry, why you kept distance, why your life did not become what you wanted. The story may contain truth. You may have been genuinely harmed. You may have been treated unfairly. Forgiveness does not require pretending otherwise. But there is a hard question you must eventually face. How long will you allow the person who hurt you to continue occupying your mind? They may not be thinking about the event anymore. They may have changed. They may have died. Yet every time you replay the injury, you give them another moment of your life. This is not justice. It is continued imprisonment. You may believe that releasing resentment means the other person escapes responsibility. But your resentment is not a prison they are sitting inside. It is a fire you are holding. They may never apologize. They may never understand. They may never admit what they did. Your peace cannot depend entirely on their awakening. If it does, you have handed them control of your remaining years. Forgiveness in Buddhism is not an official command that must be performed instantly. It is a gradual release of hatred. You begin by recognizing that hatred hurts the mind carrying it. You do not excuse the behavior. You do not deny consequences. You simply decide that you no longer want to rehearse the injury as your daily spiritual practice. At first, the mind may resist. It says, "But what happened was wrong." Yes, it may have been wrong. Releasing hatred does not make it right. The mind says, "They do not deserve forgiveness." Perhaps forgiveness is not about what they deserve. Perhaps it is about what you no longer deserve to carry. You deserve to sit in your own home without being invaded by a person from the past. You deserve to wake up without reopening the same trial. You deserve to experience a peaceful day without feeling guilty that peace somehow betrays your pain. Letting go does not erase history. It changes your relationship with history. The memory may remain, but the emotional charge can weaken. You remember without being consumed. You understand without continuing the battle. This process also applies to regret. Perhaps the person you cannot forgive is yourself. You look back and see mistakes clearly. You stayed in the wrong relationship too long. You neglected your health. You worked too much. You were harsh with your children. You allowed fear to make decisions. You wasted money. You failed to apologize. You did not appreciate someone before they died. The mind says, "I should have known better." But did you truly know then what you know now? Wisdom often arrives after the mistake. That is why it is wisdom. You were acting through the understanding, fear, conditioning, and emotional capacity available at that time. This does not remove responsibility. It provides context. Self-forgiveness without responsibility becomes avoidance. Responsibility without self-forgiveness becomes punishment. The Buddhist path asks for both honesty and compassion. You acknowledge the harm. You make amends where possible. You change the behavior. Then you stop demanding that the past become different. Perhaps you owe someone an apology. Do not wait for the perfect moment. A sincere apology does not need a long defense. You do not say, "I am sorry, but you also made mistakes." You do not say, "I am sorry you felt hurt." You say, "I see that my behavior caused pain. I was wrong. I regret it." Then you allow the other person to respond according to their own process. They may forgive you. They may not. An apology is not a purchase that guarantees reconciliation. It is an act of integrity. You clean your side of the road. If the person is no longer alive, you can still practice acknowledgement. You can write what you wish you had said. You can sit quietly and speak it. You can honor the person through changed behavior. You can treat someone else with the kindness you failed to offer before. The past cannot be repaired literally, but its lesson can be carried forward. This is how regret becomes wisdom. Without transformation, regret is repetitive pain. With transformation, regret becomes guidance. Ask yourself, what is this memory trying to teach me now? If the answer is clear, then live the lesson. Do not continue paying for the same mistake after you have understood it. Many people believe that constant self-criticism proves they are responsible. It does not. Sometimes self-criticism is another form of self-absorption. You remain focused on how terrible you feel rather than on how differently you can live. Real remorse becomes action. It becomes patience. It becomes humility. It becomes honesty. It becomes a refusal to repeat the harm. The remaining years of your life do not need to be controlled by your worst decision. A single chapter is not the entire book. Even if much of the book has already been written, the final pages still affect its meaning. A person who lived selfishly for decades can still begin practicing generosity. A person who carried anger can still become gentle. A person who avoided truth can still speak honestly. A person who neglected relationships can still reach out. It may be late, but late is not the same as impossible. Do not use age as an excuse to remain unchanged. Some older people say, "This is just who I am." Usually that means, "I do not want to examine this habit." But Buddhism does not teach that personality is fixed. Every pattern exists because of repeated causes and conditions. Change the conditions and the pattern can change. You may have practiced impatience for 50 years. That makes the habit strong. It does not make the habit sacred. You may have always complained. That does not mean complaint is your identity. You may have avoided affection because vulnerability felt dangerous. That does not mean you must die emotionally guarded. You can practice a new response. Perhaps not perfectly, perhaps not quickly, but sincerely. The older you are, the more valuable this work becomes. You have less time to waste defending patterns that make you and others miserable. Youth often believes there will always be another chance. Old age knows better. Use that knowledge. Say what must be said. Release what cannot be repaired. Learn what the pain came to teach. Do not build your final home inside an old wound. The past is a teacher. It is not a place to live. Truth 6. Peace comes from needing less, not having more. For much of life, people are taught to add more money, more possessions, more recognition, more influence, more comfort, more certainty, more approval. The mind creates a promise. When I finally have enough, I will relax. But enough keeps moving. You earn more, and your standard of security increases. You receive praise, and now you fear losing it. You acquire possessions, and they require maintenance. You create a reputation, and then you must protect it. The search for more does not necessarily end when a person becomes older. Sometimes it becomes more desperate. You may want more attention from children, more reassurance from doctors, more control over family decisions, more proof that you still matter, more guarantees about the future. The objects change, but the hunger remains. Buddhism teaches contentment. Contentment is not laziness. It is not a rejection of improvement. It is the ability to recognize sufficiency. Without contentment, even abundance feels like poverty. With contentment, a simple life can feel complete. Old age offers a natural opportunity to simplify. You may no longer need to impress employers. You may no longer need to compete socially. You may no longer need clothing for every occasion, objects for every possibility, or opinions about every public argument. But the mind may continue carrying the habits of accumulation. It says, I might need this someday. I must remain informed about everything. I need everyone to understand my point of view. I need my family to recognize everything I contributed. I need life to confirm that my choices were correct. These needs create tension. Some are practical, most are psychological. Examine them carefully. What do you truly need today? Food, shelter, medical care, human connection, safety, meaningful activity, rest. Beyond these, the mind adds layers. It needs admiration. It needs agreement. It needs control. It needs to be remembered in a particular way. It needs other people to behave according to its preferences. These needs are endless because they depend on what you cannot control. Peace grows when the number of demands decreases. Imagine two older people facing similar circumstances. Both live modestly. Both have physical limitations. Both receive occasional visits from family. The first person constantly calculates what is missing. The house is too small. The family does not visit enough. The food is repetitive. The body is unreliable. The neighbors are noisy. The world is getting worse. Every day becomes evidence of deprivation. The second person does not deny difficulty, but they notice what is present. There is a chair near the window. There is enough food for today. A friend called. The body allowed a short walk. The morning was quiet. The medicine is helping. The same life feels different because attention is trained differently. Gratitude does not change every circumstance. It changes what the mind emphasizes. This is not a trick. It is a discipline. The untrained mind is designed to detect problems. This helped human beings survive. But when survival is not immediately threatened, the same mechanism creates chronic dissatisfaction. There is always something imperfect to notice. A Buddhist practice of gratitude intentionally balances attention. You ask, what is not wrong in this moment? Perhaps pain is present, but not everywhere in the body. Perhaps loneliness is present, but complete abandonment is not. Perhaps the day is difficult, but there is still one person you can contact. Perhaps you cannot do what you once did, but you can still feel the warmth of sunlight. The mind may dismiss these things because they seem small, but peace is often hidden inside what the ambitious mind considers too small to matter. A quiet meal, a clean bed, a conversation without conflict, a moment of laughter, the sound of rain, the ability to breathe without difficulty, the presence of someone who does not require you to perform. How many of these experiences did you overlook when you were younger because you were chasing something larger? Old age can become the season in which you finally recognize value without needing excitement. This requires letting go of the addiction to importance. Many people suffer because they need to feel central. They want family decisions to pass through them. They want their opinions to carry the most weight. They become upset when younger people do not ask for advice. They interpret independence as rejection, but perhaps your role is changing. For decades, you may have stood at the center of family activity. Now you are being invited to step slightly aside. The ego experiences this as disappearance. Wisdom experiences it as transition. A mature tree does not resent the young trees for growing. It provides shade. It allows space. It does not demand that every branch face the same direction. Your experience remains valuable, but experience becomes wisdom only when it is offered appropriately. Unrequested advice often feels like control. Repeated advice becomes criticism. Advice tied to guilt becomes manipulation. Before speaking, ask, is this person asking for guidance, or am I trying to reduce my own discomfort? Sometimes the most loving act is silence, not cold silence, not punishment. Attentive silence. You allow another person to think, struggle, and learn. You remain available without taking over. This is a difficult form of generosity. It means giving others ownership of their lives. Peace also requires needing less approval. Perhaps you still worry about what relatives think. You still replay comments. You still want people to recognize your sacrifices. You still hope someone will say, "You were right all along." But approval is unstable. People remember differently. Children may not interpret childhood the way you do. A family member may never fully understand what you endured. Someone may misjudge you. Can you live peacefully without correcting every misunderstanding? This question becomes increasingly important. You have limited energy. Do not spend it trying to control your image inside every person's mind. You cannot. Even people who love you hold an incomplete version of you. They saw your actions, but not every fear behind them. They experienced your decisions, but not every pressure. Their interpretation belongs to them. Your task is not to manage every interpretation. Your task is to live with as much integrity as possible now. Where you caused harm, acknowledge it. Where you acted sincerely, let that be enough. Where others misunderstand you, decide whether clarification is useful, then release the rest. The need to be understood by everyone is another form of bondage. Simplicity also applies to emotional conflict. As people age, some become less tolerant of unnecessary drama. This can be wisdom, but others continue collecting disputes. They argue about inheritance, family loyalty, old insults, social opinions, and minor disrespect. They treat every disagreement as a threat to identity. Ask yourself, does this argument deserve one of my remaining days? That is a powerful question. Not, am I right? You may be right. But does the argument deserve your life energy? Will winning create peace? Will the other person become wiser because you repeated your point for the 10th time? Some battles continue only because nobody wants to be the first to stop. Stopping does not always mean admitting defeat. Sometimes it means recognizing waste. You can say, "We see this differently. I do not want to continue harming the relationship over it." This is not weakness. It is the strength to value peace more than ego. Contentment does not mean becoming passive about injustice or remaining silent when something important must be addressed. It means learning the difference between what matters and what merely irritates the ego. A mind without priorities wastes itself on everything. A wise mind chooses carefully. What truly matters in the years ahead? Your answer may be simpler than you expect. To reduce unnecessary suffering. To care for the body without worshipping it. To repair relationships where repair is possible. To stop creating new harm. To appreciate those who remain. To prepare the mind for uncertainty. To live honestly. Everything else becomes secondary. Peace does not require a perfect family. It does not require perfect health. It does not require a large house, constant entertainment, or universal respect. It requires a mind that knows when enough is enough. Enough food for this meal, enough strength for this step, enough time for this breath, enough love to offer kindness now. The mind searching for more misses the life already present. The mind that recognizes enough can finally rest. Truth 7. Remembering death makes life more precious, not more frightening. Many people avoid speaking about death. They consider it negative. They change the subject. They use softer words. They act as though silence will keep death at a distance. But death does not become less certain because it is ignored. Buddhism encourages awareness of death, not to make life gloomy, but to make life honest. You will die. Everyone you know will die. The date is uncertain. The fact is not. At first, this truth may create fear. The mind asks, what will happen to me? What will I lose? Will I suffer? Will I be forgotten? These questions are natural, but avoiding them does not create peace. It only leaves the fear unexamined. An unexamined fear grows in darkness. Death awareness brings it into the light. You begin by recognizing that death is not an abnormal event that happens to a few unfortunate people. It is part of life. Birth and death are not opposites. They belong to the same process. The moment a body is born, it becomes subject to death. The timing varies. The law does not. You have already witnessed countless endings. Days ended. Seasons ended. Relationships ended. Jobs ended. Homes were left behind. Versions of yourself disappeared. The child you once were is gone. The young adult is gone. The middle-aged person is gone. You have experienced many small deaths without calling them death. Life has always been a process of appearing and disappearing. The final death of the body is the most complete form of this change, but it is not disconnected from the rest of nature. Leaves fall. Animals die. Stars burn out. Buildings collapse. Cultures change. Nothing formed remains forever. Why should the body be the only exception? The ego wants an exception because it cannot imagine a world without itself. It has spent a lifetime placing itself at the center of experience. My family, my history, my plans, my pain, my body. Then death says, all of this must be released. The ego interprets release as destruction. Buddhist practice prepares the mind by teaching release in small ways. Release an argument, release an object, release an expectation, release the need to control another person, release the identity you no longer need. Each act of letting go weakens the belief that holding is the only form of safety. This is why simplifying life can reduce fear of death. A person who is tightly attached to everything has more to defend. A person who has practiced letting go understands that release is not always loss. Sometimes release is relief. Think of how the body feels when it puts down something heavy. For years, you may have carried the need to be right, the need to be admired, the need to preserve old wounds, and the need to control outcomes. Death awareness asks, do you want to carry these burdens until the final breath? Perhaps not. Perhaps the knowledge of death can help you put them down now. When time feels unlimited, people postpone what matters. They postpone forgiveness. They postpone spiritual practice. They postpone rest. They postpone honest conversations. They postpone appreciating their partner. They say, one day I will slow down. One day I will meditate. One day I will visit. One day I will apologize. But death does not ask whether your schedule is convenient. Remembering death breaks the illusion of endless postponement. It says, this day is not a rehearsal. This conversation may be the last conversation. This meal may not repeat. This person may not be available next year. Your own mind may not have the same clarity tomorrow. Do not use this awareness to panic. Use it to become sincere. What deserves attention now? Who needs to hear that you love them? What resentment has already consumed enough time? What possession are you protecting as though it can follow you? What truth are you avoiding? What simple beauty are you failing to notice? Death awareness clarifies priorities. Imagine that you knew you had 1 year remaining. Would you continue the same argument with your sibling? Would you still care whether a distant relative approved of your choices? Would you spend hours consuming news that leaves you angry but changes nothing? Would you continue waiting for someone else to begin reconciliation? Perhaps some things would suddenly appear unimportant. Now ask a harder question. Why must you receive a deadline before living according to what matters? You already have a deadline. You simply do not know its date. Uncertainty is not a reason to delay. It is the reason to begin. Fear of death often contains fear of unfinished life. You may think, I have not done enough. But what would enough mean? Enough achievements? Enough money? Enough recognition? The mind can always invent another unfinished task. A peaceful death does not necessarily require a perfectly completed life. No life is complete in every way. There will always be words unsaid, places unvisited, and possibilities unexplored. Peace comes from releasing the demand for total completion. You did not come here to control every outcome. You came into conditions, acted through limited understanding, loved imperfectly, made mistakes, learned, and changed. That is human life. Your task now is not to make the entire past perfect. It is to meet the present honestly. Perhaps you fear being forgotten. This fear is deeply human. You want your life to matter. You want your children and grandchildren to remember you. But memory is also impermanent. Even famous people become names in books. Most people gradually disappear from collective memory. Does that make their lives meaningless? A kind act may shape someone who later shapes another person. The original giver may be forgotten, but the effect continues. A patient parent may create emotional safety that influences generations. A sincere apology may end a family pattern. A moment of compassion may stop someone from becoming cruel. Meaning does not require permanent recognition. A candle does not become useless because the flame eventually goes out. While it burns, it gives light. Your life has already affected others in ways you cannot measure. Some effects were helpful. Some may have been harmful. You can still influence the direction of what continues. Practice kindness now, not so that your name survives, because kindness reduces suffering while you are here. This is enough. You may also fear the physical process of dying. This fear should not be dismissed. Pain and loss of control are real concerns. Make practical preparations. Discuss medical preferences. Organize documents. Communicate your wishes. Do not force your family to guess everything during a crisis. Preparation is not pessimism. It is compassion. It reduces confusion for those who may need to make difficult decisions. After practical preparation, return to the mind. You cannot rehearse every circumstance. You do not know exactly how death will arrive. The mind wants guarantees that do not exist. Practice meeting uncertainty now. Every time a plan changes, notice the reaction. Every time the body behaves unexpectedly, notice the fear. Every time you lose control of a small situation, practice softening. These are preparations. The final moment will ask the same question that every difficult moment asks. Can you meet what is happening without adding unnecessary resistance? No one can promise how you will respond, but you can train. You can become familiar with the breath. You can become familiar with observing fear. You can become familiar with releasing thought. You can learn to say, "This experience is changing." You can learn not to grasp at every mental image. You can cultivate loving kindness toward yourself and others. These practices do not guarantee a painless death. They create conditions for a less confused mind. Buddhist teachings often emphasize karma, especially intention and action. This does not mean you should spend old age terrified that every past mistake will punish you. Fear alone does not purify the mind. Wise action does. What are you cultivating now? Are you feeding resentment? Are you strengthening compassion? Are you practicing honesty? Are you creating peace in the people around you? The direction of the mind matters. A garden may have been neglected for years, but you can still stop planting weeds. You can still water what is wholesome. You can still remove what causes harm. Do not say, "It is too late." As long as awareness is present, a different intention is possible. Perhaps you have only one day. One day is enough for one sincere act, one apology, one moment of forgiveness, one expression of gratitude, one decision not to create more harm. The value of an action is not measured only by how much time follows it. A final moment of clarity is still clarity. Death awareness also changes the way you see age. Instead of saying, "I am old, therefore life is nearly over," you begin saying, "Life has always been temporary, therefore this moment is precious." A young person is not guaranteed tomorrow. An old person is not excluded from today. Do not confuse statistical likelihood with spiritual reality. The only life anyone can directly experience is the present moment. The young person imagining decades ahead is living now. The older person remembering decades behind is living now. Now is the shared ground. You do not need to deny your age. You need to stop using age as a reason to abandon the moment. Perhaps you cannot begin a 40-year plan, but you can begin a peaceful morning. You can begin speaking more gently. You can begin meditating for 5 minutes. You can begin releasing one room of unnecessary possessions. You can begin calling someone without waiting for them to call first. You can begin listening to your body with respect instead of disgust. You can begin preparing for death without allowing death to dominate life. Aging is not only the process of losing, it is the process of being invited to release what was never permanent. At first, this feels like life is taking things from you. Later, you may understand that life is asking you to become lighter. You do not need to carry every identity into the final years. You do not need to remain the powerful one, the successful one, the victim, the provider, the authority, or the person who always knows what to do. You can simply be a human being, breathing, changing, learning, letting go. There is great peace in no longer needing to perform a fixed self. Perhaps this is the hidden gift of old age. The world slowly removes the roles you depended upon. It feels like loss, but beneath the roles, there is an opportunity to encounter life more directly, not as a job title, not as someone's parent, not as the owner of a house, not as the person others once admired, just this living experience, this breath, this sensation, this moment of awareness. Buddhism does not ask you to celebrate every pain of aging. It asks you to understand what aging reveals. The body was always temporary. Other people were never controllable. Possessions were never permanent. The past was never recoverable. Approval was never reliable. The future was never guaranteed. These truths did not suddenly become real because you grew older. They were always real. Old age simply makes them more difficult to ignore. This is why aging can become a path of awakening. What youth understood intellectually, old age understands physically. Impermanence is no longer an idea. It is visible in the hands. It is felt in the joints. It is heard in the silence left by people who are gone. This can produce bitterness, or it can produce wisdom. Bitterness says, everything is being taken from me. Wisdom says, nothing was ever mine to keep, so let me appreciate what remains. Bitterness says, I am no longer who I was. Wisdom says, I never stop changing. Bitterness says, my life is becoming smaller. Wisdom says, perhaps I can finally live more deeply. Bitterness says, I am approaching death. Wisdom says, therefore I will stop postponing life. You still have a choice, not over every condition, not over how long the body remains strong, not over whether others stay close, but you have a choice about what you practice. Every complaint is practice. Every act of gratitude is practice. Every replayed resentment is practice. Every moment of letting go is practice. Every harsh word is practice. Every patient breath is practice. The mind becomes shaped by what it repeats. What do you want the mind to know well? Fear or awareness? Control or acceptance? Bitterness or compassion? You do not need to transform everything at once. Choose one burden. Perhaps it is an old argument. Perhaps it is shame about the body. Perhaps it is disappointment in your children. Perhaps it is regret over a decision. Perhaps it is fear of death. Hold that burden gently. Do not attack it. Understand it. Ask what expectation keeps it alive. Ask what identity is attached to it. Ask what would happen if you stopped feeding it for one day. You may discover that letting go is not one dramatic event. It is a decision made repeatedly. The memory returns, and you do not follow it. The complaint rises, and you choose silence. The fear appears, and you return to the breath. The urge to control someone arises, and you allow them space. The mirror shows an older face, and you refuse to insult it. Again and again you release. This is the practice. Your remaining years do not have to be the years in which everything was lost. They can be the years in which unnecessary suffering was finally put down. They can be the years in which you stopped trying to win every argument, the years in which you forgave yourself, the years in which you appreciated ordinary life, the years in which you loved people without trying to own them, the years in which you prepared for death by learning how to live. Do not wait for perfect health. Do not wait for the family to behave exactly as you want. Do not wait for the past to apologize. Do not wait for fear to disappear. begin within the conditions that exist. This is the only place awakening has ever begun. You may be old in years, but the present moment is always new. This breath has never happened before. This day has never happened before. You are meeting this exact moment for the first and only time. Treat it with respect. The past has already received enough of your attention. The future will arrive according to its own conditions. Return to what is here. Feel the breath. Relax the hands. Soften the face. Notice what is not missing. Someone may still love you. A body may still be carrying you. Awareness may still be present. A chance to choose kindness may still be available. That is not a small life. That is life itself. Do not measure the value of your remaining years only by their number. A long life lived in resentment is not necessarily richer than a shorter time lived with clarity. Depth matters. Presence matters. The quality of the mind matters. One peaceful day can contain more life than a year spent lost in fear. You cannot return to youth, but perhaps returning to youth is not what you truly need. Perhaps you need to stop believing that youth was the only season worth living. The morning has its beauty. The afternoon has its strength. The evening has its wisdom. Do not demand morning light from the evening sky. See the beauty that belongs to this hour. The light may be softer now. The shadows may be longer. But softer light can reveal what brightness concealed. You are not being asked to become young again. You are being asked to become awake. And as long as this moment is here, that possibility remains.